If we look at the overall idea of pulling, I would argue that I've written more about pulling than anybody else online has, and I've put a lot of videos out online as well. As the first person to have any videos on pulling online. And the videos I did on pulling I'm very happy with. I don't feel like I would change much of what I said. I feel like what I said was correct still to this day. So I'll give you some tips, some psychology behind pulling first, and then talk about how we actually get more distance in our pull. Okay. So I've written about this before. I think pulling is super underrated. When I was on the men's team in Calgary here, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So when I was on the men's team, we used to, or one of the guys used to rock, paper, scissors for the pull. And so the pull wasn't about, the person who threw the best would do it all the time. It was whoever got the disc first, which is just stupid because in football, you have a kicker. They always kick the ball, So you don't see some guy sprinting over, picking up the ball and saying, I want to kick it. That's not how it works. You need the person who is the best puller on the field to pull the disc every single time. Okay, 10, 15, 20 yards extra distance is going to help your team a lot. The person who is the best puller on the field may not have the highest percentage. So as much as we want to have the pull go inbounds, we would rather have a disc that, and the percentages are kind of made up, but we'd rather have a disc that hits the back corner 80% of the time and is a 20% brick the rest of the time, versus somebody who can pull in 90% of the time, but they're only pulling it half field, okay? The reason for that is when we're pinning the team deep in their end zone, that is so much more valuable than having a team just past half, okay? We're giving them so much more pressure by having the disc deeper in the end zone, so we need to make sure that we get the disc as far down the field as possible and in the air as long as possible. So there's a lot of people who can pull the disc 80, 90 yards, but they can't throw it very high. And so we need to have someone who can throw it high and also throw it far. If we look at the overall competition that I talked about earlier, that's similar to a throw, run, catch. So a throw, run, catch, I try and throw it in the air, I run after it, and I catch it. And my goal is to have it go as far as possible. That's essentially the pull. If I can throw a pull where I can run down and catch it myself, that means my entire team can run down and set up before the other team catches the disc, which is perfect. That's what we want. How do I actually get to that point? Okay, because that is essentially the perfect pull. If I can catch my own throw, that's what we want. An even more perfect pull is one where I get there and I'm waiting for it, but that's that's really hard to do, especially with an ultimate disc. But if we can work to that point, if that's sort of our end goal is to get a pull that we throw it, we run down, we wait for it, and then we can catch it. There's only a handful of people I've ever seen who've done that, and a handful being maybe 3 people. Okay, so it's very rare, but that is our goal. And so to get to that point, we need to learn how to throw it further. We need to learn how to throw it higher. The way that we learn to throw it further is we do strengthening. Okay, so we work out in the gym, we get more flexible. We work on throwing. So one of the best ways to develop throwing muscles is to throw. Okay, so that's for distance. And then for height, we need to work on angles. If I'm throwing it higher in the air and I'm not changing the angle, it's going to come straight back to me. Okay, it's going to just stall out, come right back. So the higher I throw it, the more angle I need to put on it. Okay, we talked about inside out, outside in. So when I'm throwing downwind, you see some people throw a big roller, big outside in roller. That's a perfectly good pull. Hits the ground, rolls out of bounds, out the back. They bring it to the front of the line. If it ends up hitting someone's foot, you hit it. You bring it out. If it went out the side or at the back, you bring it there. So that's a great pull. Throwing an inside out pull is also a great pull. Throwing it downwind, put it out high and let it float down. When we're throwing an inside out pull, we want to throw it into the wind. We don't want to throw an outside in pull into the wind. So inside out into the wind, outside in, downwind. Reason for that is when I'm throwing an inside out throw, it's spinning upwards the whole time. So as I throw it, it's spinning up. It's going to be cutting through the wind better than an outside in pull, which is always falling. Okay? So that's the reason for that. We also need to think about where we're pulling it. So I will put up an image. I had an article about this before. It's called pull diagonally and have better pulls. I learned this a couple years ago from a friend of mine. If we're pulling a disc, we don't want to start in the middle of the field because where's it going to go? It's going to go out of bounds. Okay? We start on the corners and throw it in the middle of the field. That's the perfect way to pull, I think. So if we're throwing it inside out, we start on, so if I'm facing downfield where I'm sitting right now, I'm going to start on the left side, throw an inside out pull. And so as it goes, it's going to go out of bounds the furthest point possible and then come back in and land in the middle of the field. If I'm pulling it outside in, I want to start on the right side of the field. Okay, this is if I'm a right-handed thrower. Start on the right side, throw it. It's going to come up, and it's going to come down the middle of the field. Again, going out of bounds as far down the field as possible. Okay, it's fun, it's cool to throw an inside-out pull starting on the right side of the field. It goes out of bounds right away, and then you hope that it comes back in. I've done that before where it didn't come back in bounds, and so the other team got it on our end line, scored right away. It was very easy. So we don't want to make that mistake. So think about that. When we're throwing a pull, we want to be throwing diagonally. Okay, we want to be throwing it and having it land in the middle of the field, putting some nice edge on it. Throwing a nice flat pull, it's not really a flat pull. Okay, that's a flat huck. Okay, throwing the disc flat, you can't put it as high. It's going to stall back. So we always need to be putting angle in the disc. Okay. Do we want the disc to turn over? So when I'm throwing an inside-out throw, the most I ever want the disc to do is flatten out. I never want it to turn. If it turns, especially if I'm throwing it diagonally, then it can go out of bounds and just keep going. Same thing with an outside in. I never want it to go more than flat. The most I want it to do is flat. Again, if it fades off, it's going to go out of bounds. Okay, so we need to control that, and we control how the disc flies by putting angle in the disc. Pretty straightforward. Okay. The biggest key with pulling is getting a lot of spin on the disc. So I've talked about this in a lot of my videos. The way to get more spin on your throw is by, obviously, it's all in the snap of the wrist, but we want to start by cocking the wrist. Okay. So you'll see a lot of people, when they go to throw, they're holding the disc like that. Okay. I don't want to do that. I want to start by cocking my wrist back. That's the first thing I do. And then as I follow through, I'm snapping it. Okay? So start by bringing it back in. It doesn't have to be directly on the forearm. Okay? Depends how flexible you are. I never want it to be behind my arm. Okay, it's going to be slipping out of my hand. I'm not going to have a good grip on it. It will depend on your wrist flexibility, but ideally we want it sort of back here, resting, tucked in. Still a firm grip on the hand. Okay, we don't want to lose the grip. Bring it back and then snap it through. Okay, so it's all about getting that wrist snap. That's how we're going to control the flight of the disc much better. You'll see in some videos I'm pulling, I'm not going to mention any names, Brody Smith, changing the grip. So we never want to change the grip. So the grip that I hold the disc in is this. Basically a modified Berkeley grip. You see some people talking about a power grip. I never recommend holding the power grip because it pulls your hand forward. Okay, so these lines on the Frisbee, they're called the Hedrick lines, after Ed Hedrick, who was with the PDGA. So I want my thumb on the Hedrick lines, and then I want all four fingers underneath. But the key pivot point is between the thumb and the index finger. Again, I don't recommend holding it like that because it pulls your hand over top. I like to have my knuckle sort of on top here, and I hold it like that underneath. So the bigger your hands are, the more your fingers will splay out. The smaller your hands are, probably the more tucked in they'll be. But that's the grip I hold for a 5-yard backhand, a 50-yard huck, a 90-yard pull. Okay, that's how I hold the disc. I never change it because I always want to be ready to throw whatever throw I need to throw. If I fake a 5-yard throw and then throw 50-yard huck, I don't want to have to change my grip. Okay, so hold the disc in the same grip the whole time. Okay, you don't need to change your grip for each throw. That's not necessary. What other things can I talk about? Okay. So there are some drills that we can do to work on pulling. My favorite drill is the Mta drill, or the TRC. So I talked earlier about the throw and catch. So I throw it, and I try and catch my own throw. That's a great one, but before you start that one, start with the MTA. The MTA is very simple. You throw the disc in the air and you try and catch it. But the goal here is to have it come back to you. You don't care about distance. Okay, the MTA that you're looking for here is one where you can throw it up, have it come straight back to you so you're barely moving. Okay, we're working on consistency of release. We want the disc to be able to go straight out and come straight back to us. If we can get the disc that flat and that controlled, that's perfect. But you'll see why that's not a good pull, because if I don't put an angle on it, then it's going to go straight out and come straight back to me. That's not what I want at all. Okay. So MTA, maximum time loft, is a fantastic drill for working on your pulling because it's working on getting as much power as possible. You're playing around with the height. If you throw it too high, okay, it's going to come straight down. If you throw it too low, it's going to go far out and not come back to you. So you're going to find that perfect point. Essentially, you're throwing it into the wind. You always want to throw an MTA into the wind. When we're pulling, we can't always pick the direction of the wind. Start of the game, we can't. So when we're doing a pull, we need to practice in all wind conditions. So do the MTA into the wind so you can have it come back to you. Extra bonus, you also get to work on your catching. But make sure you're practicing throwing it downwind, throwing it crosswind, both directions, and throwing it into a headwind. Just practicing, figuring out the different angles you need, how much snap you need to throw on it. And as I said, always throw a pull with an angle on the disc, and you always want it to end up, the maximum you want it to end up is flat. You never want it to turn over, okay? So if I can give you 3 takeaways for this talk, they would be: increase the spin on the disc, control the angle of the disc or the edges, so make sure that you're throwing with an angle but you're never having it turn over, always maximum flat. And then think about where you're starting off the pull and where you want it to land in the field. Okay, so as I said, I recommend pulling it diagonally. You get to cover more space and you get less chance of it going out for a brick. Any questions, as always, visit me on ultimaterob.com.